Go ahead, Smith. I was just answering to someone. Yeah, go ahead.
Sure. Today's session is not going to be about the testing framework that we were planning to do. Today's session will be on the API part, right? So today what we'll try to do is we'll learn on how to create our own APIs, right? And to understand the API structure, which is very important for any API testing. So even if we are going deep dive into the framework, we first need to understand what an API is, right? And what are the factors that we need to consider when we are creating our own API. The reason for today's session being on creation of API rather than testing the API is I want you guys to understand that how API is created and how you can look into the API code and try to understand how those APIs are working. I'm pretty sure if someone who is doing either manual testing on API or any kind of testing on API, uh, you get a bit of a documentation from your uh, developer team to say that this is the implementation of the API. It might be on the Swagger, but when you look at the documentation, you understand the APIs uh, at a very basic level, right? And from the top approach. But if you're able to read how the API is created, and once you create your own API, you will be able to understand what that API is actually doing, right? And why we need an API, and what are the functions that an API perform, right? So those are very valuable in creation of scenarios. So API testing is all about more than automation is about creation of scenarios and then automate it, right? So in today's session, we'll learn on how to create an API using Flask Python, and then we'll deploy it on a server, right? Which will not be local, it will be on the cloud. So we'll deploy it on a cloud server, and then we will have access to that API, and then we will use that API to test uh, our throughout the project, right? You can have different. So once you learn how to create your API, you can create your own API, which might be a use case that is relevant to your organization or to your thinking. We can use that throughout the process on the testing, right? And we'll keep adding on top of it what are the factors that needs to go into the testing part, looking at the API implementation, right? So today we'll create a very basic couple of APIs. And then once we have those APIs, we'll try. So that after this session, you guys will be free to go ahead, add a test to Tavern and test your own APIs, right? Not the public APIs that we have been doing till now. You will be testing your own creation, right? That will give you a better visibility of what API looks like and how to test them, right? So let's get started with that. Let me share my screen. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
All right. So let's get started with one thing on installing something, right? So what we need to create an API is a Python framework, which is a development module for API development. So we'll install a library called Flask. So what we need to do is, all we need to do is do pip install Flask. I will put that in the Teams chat. So I'll request everyone to install this on your machine.
Sumit,
Yep.
should we create a new Python project for today?
Yes. So after you have installed Flask, create a new project and name it as Flask_API.
Thank you.
Once you have created the project, go to this link and sign up for this. So Heroku is basically your free cloud server where we will use basically to create a Python deployment. So it's basically a cloud application platform. It allows you to deploy your applications uh, majorly in Node or Python. That's what most of the people use. It has a free tier, which is basically more than enough, which gives us 1,000 hours per month. The good part about Heroku is that if you don't need to run the server all the time. It's on demand basis. So when there is a demand, only then your server will start running, and then it will deactivate once the demand is not there. So when you hit your API, your server will start at that point, and then it will run for 1 hour. And after 1 hour, if there is no activity, it will shut it down itself. So that way, 1,000 hours is more than enough in a month for any application to be on cloud, right? We can use AWS VPC, we can use Azure pipeline or VPC. We can do it in a container, but this is pretty basic in terms of the deployment. And it is a very, you don't have to do a lot of things to deploy this, right? It comes, a lot of the deployment tools comes baked in, which is perfect for any new app that you need to deploy on the cloud. Yeah, I'll increase the font size. Is it better now?
Yes, thank you.
So it says unknown or unsupported command install. The pip install Flask. Do you have Python installed on your machine? Uh, pip comes automatically. Unsupported command install. Hmm. And then you're not able to run pip. That's strange. Is everyone else able to install Flask on their machines?
I was able.
Yes.
Hmm. That's a strange error.
I think it might mean that it's not in environment available.
I don't have the environment variable set in.
Yeah, that's you will need to go to Python folder to run it.
Oh, I need to. Okay.
So there is your Python folder will have a folder inside called scripts. There it should show that you have pip installed already. If not, there is another way that you can install pip, but it doesn't say the pip is not installed. It says unsupported command install. That's a very, very strange error. Let me know if you're not able to figure it out after some time. Then we'll move forward. Even if your Flask is not installed, it's fine. You'll still be able to do today's session because we are going to deploy it on the cloud, right? Nothing on the local. So
Okay.
it doesn't matter.
I get that now.
Flask.
Thank you. I'm able to install. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you. I use a different command.
All right. So let's so once you have, so I believe everyone has signed up for the Heroku. So once that is done, can you go here and install the CLI version of it? So if you have Windows, you just install the 64-bit installer. If you have Mac, then the command is there. And if you have a Linux machine, then a different command is there. So just install this. For Windows, it is pretty simple. And please select all the check marks saying add to the path as well.
Sumit, I have one more question.
Sure.
Are we supposed to add a Flask that we just installed to our machines to the project interpreter inside our new Python projects that we created in PyCharm?
So I asked you guys to install Flask. The reason was to run it so that you are able to run it locally as well. It doesn't. You don't have to change anything in the interpreter settings. Once you select an interpreter, if you have a single interpreter, you don't need to do anything. If you have multiple interpreters, then you need to make sure your whatever Python version that is showing where you installed Flask, that version needs to be selected.
I was checking my Python interpreter just now, and am I supposed to see a Flask package there? Because I don't see it at the moment.
So if you do, that's fine. If you do a pip freeze, you should be able to see a Flask.
Okay, I'll try that.
Can you do a pip freeze?
Sumit, can you please tell what has to be done?
Yes, I can do it.
Yeah,
I don't get any response, but the command is run.
Yeah, it will take some time because there might be multiple libraries. So the next step is to, if you look at the chat window, the next step is to install the CLI version of Heroku.
Okay, thank you.
It says that we need to install Git as well. Do we need it?
No.
Okay.
So if you don't have the Git installed in your machine, that you might need to install that as well. So yeah, you can see Flask, right? Flask version 1.1.2. Yeah, definitely we would need Git to be installed as well. If I was assuming that everyone has Git on their machines. But you don't need a GitHub access or anything. We are not going to upload it on the GitHub, though that's a pipeline that we can build with Heroku as well. But we are going to directly deploy it on Heroku repository. Is everyone able to install the CLI and everything that is required?
Not yet.
Okay, I'll wait.
So Smith, once we signed up to, then next step will be the creating a new app. Or what is the next step?
So whatever you can do in CLI, you can do it through the UI as well. But CLI gives you better control over without getting into the UI. Because you don't when you're adding to the repository or you're deploying something, you want the process to be really fast. Uh, the same way you can do it in the UI, but then it's mostly for the debugging purpose so that you can see what's there and what's not there. But mostly whenever a developer or when we use as a part of the development process, CLI is always a preferred method.
Sumit, so after that Heroku account, do I need to install CLI same way I install pip? Sorry, Flask?
No, if you go to the link that's in the chat window, so you click on that link, it will take you to a page where there are three options. One is Mac OS, one is Windows, one is Ubuntu. So install the 64-bit installer if you have 64-bit Windows machine. If you have 32-bit, install 32-bit installer. It's a pretty straightforward installation. Yeah, and just make sure that the check mark is there on the first page of the installer Windows. When it asks for the option, all the options are checkmarked. Okay, awesome. Is everyone able to install the Heroku CLI?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So let's move on to the main part, right? What we are planning to do. So the first thing that we want to do is create a application file, right? Which will be our main file uh, on all our API requests. Though this does require a framework as well on how you want to structure it, but we'll not go too deep into the creation of API. I just want you to understand how API works, right? So create a file called app.py, which is our application file. So we are going to deploy our application, which is our API application. So the first thing that we need to do is create a file for that application. So create a file called app.py. And now I will explain each line on this file so that you guys understand how the API is we are creating is actually going to work, right? And then once that is done, I'll explain everything. And then once that is done, then I will talk about the proc file, the requirements.txt file, the runtime file that we needed for the deployment, right? So the first part is that you are going to import an application, the Flask application. And then from that library, we're going to import request and JSONify, right? These are the two classes under the Flask library that we need to use. The first part that we need to do is we need to instantiate that Flask class from the Flask library. So this is how you will instantiate. And then the next step will be to create some test data, right? So we are creating a JSON data where we are giving a dictionary of books, right? It's in the JSON format. And then once we have created this, we're going to use this to serve as a response for the request that other people will send, right? So I'm just listing out 3 books. These are the title of the books. I'm mentioning ID, title, author, first sentence, and year published, right? So these are the parameters I'm passing for for any request that will come in, and I'm going to serve it as a response. I can give anything from this list of books that I have, right? Now, in a real world scenario, like Amazon Kindle will have thousands of books or millions of books actually. So they're gonna have a big library, which you cannot put it in basically in your project file. It requires a database, right? So I'm not going into the database, but this is how why API is needed in the first place, right? One, that your database is too big, and then your query that you need will require, if there are multiple peoples, then it require that all the connections are need to be made directly to the database. When we have an API, no user can create a direct database connection. The API is a middle layer, a server that will serve the data from the database to the user, right? So all a user will do is hit the API. Now it's API task to go and talk to database and get the data that is needed, right? But I'm not going to connect it to the database right now. We might do it at a later session if needed. But right now I'm giving an example of books, how let's consider this as a JSON object database, right? And it has 3 books that are residing inside it. The first step that we need to do is create a route for your application, right? Which is an API route, right? So so I'm giving you a server address. If I just hit that server address, right, with the method get, the return will be in an HTML format, which says distant reading archive and a paragraph, a prototype API for distant reading of science fiction novels, right? So if someone comes to my API and just hit the server and without giving any path, right, without giving any parameter, what I will get is this message. Why this root is required is this gives me a flexibility to, without knowing the path, I can check if my server is running, is up or not. If my server is down, then I won't get this message, right? Without knowing if what route I need exactly to check if my server is running or not, right? A route might fail as well, right? But this, if it's a simple HTML serve. So I exactly know this will not fail until and unless the server is down. The other API routes might need some input from my side saying get the book with this author, right? That author might not exist, and my implementation doesn't have an exception message. So my server is up, but my route that I am expecting the response from is not there, right? But then that I cannot use it as a get message saying that my server is up or not. So this basic implementation will basically tell me that if my server is up running or it is down, right? And then I'm creating another a specific route. So this is how I will structure my API, right? So I'll create a route called API with a version, whatever version I need. Might tomorrow I decide to go move to version 2 and I might want to change the implementation. I can do that. Resources, books, and all. So you can give any path that you like, but this is the standard approach which most of the organizations use. They give their versions to the API, so the maintainability is easy, and the resources or what kind of data it is serving. So it is serving books. I might have uh, some uh, some not books but some articles, right? So my resources will be articles then, right? So my this is basically linked to my database, right? So I'm telling my API that my resource is books, and that's the data I should be getting as a response, right? And the function of that route is basically telling me that I need to return all the books that are there, right? And the book is an object here, right? So when I make this call, I have a function that will return books in a JSON format. So JSONify is nothing but converting books into a JSON structure, right? And then I have another implementation of a route, which is API version 1 resources books. But here, what I'm trying to do is get the book if I mention the ID. So, right, if there is a parameter called ID in request arguments, then I will have this ID set, which I will read from the request arguments ID, right? I'll show you exactly how this request will look like. If there is no ID, so let's assume there are 0, 1, and 2 ID. If I'm entering ID 3, it should return no fields provided. It should return that the results are empty. But if I'm keeping the ID empty, then I should return an error message saying no ID field provided. Please specify an ID, right? So this is my response that should look like. Once if I have an ID that that is uh, that is mentioned in the request argument, I will go inside that object, right? Which is I'll put a for loop saying for each book in books, if book ID is equal to ID, let's say 2, then the result will add that book to the response, right? And then I will JSONify that result. So it will give me only that book with a specific ID, right? It won't return me all the books. And it should return me that JSON object. And this is your main class, which basically tells that once I execute this file, if I call the main function, then my app should run. It should run in a threaded mode, which means that multiple instances can be instantiated. It should run on port 5000. Debugging, it can be true or false. And a use reloader means that once I make changes on, let's say, this code, right? Once my server is running, it should accept that change and restart the server again to accept those changes, right? Any questions till now on this? Does this, the concept of root and API is well understood, or do you want me to elaborate more on this? This is pretty straightforward in terms of I'm not giving any post request or put request. I will only talk about get request for today so that it's much more simpler to understand. All right, so I'll move on to the other three files, which are basically the proc file, the requirements.txt, and the runtime file. So let's go to the requirements.txt. So here I am basically telling the Heroku deployment tool that when you want to deploy this app, I need these libraries to be installed uh, before you start the deployment. So that's under requirements.txt. You don't need all the libraries. I just put all the libraries because I was using this before. Uh, but for now, you only need Flask and you need Unicorn, which is basically your deploy. It creates a package for Flask, and then you might need request, and again, this other things you might not need, right? Uh, so the only thing that you want Heroku to know is in the requirement.txt file is what are all the files that are the libraries that you need for your app, right? So because when you run locally, you will already have these files, but for a Heroku to a server to know that this app needs libraries, you need to mention it separately in a requirement.txt file that these are the libraries that I need, right? Otherwise, Heroku won't know what libraries you need, right? And then we have runtime.txt, which basically tells Heroku what Python version you want this to be deployed on, right? And then we have a proc file, which is basically telling the Heroku server that it's a web application running on a Unicorn server, where your main app file is app.py, right? So app app means that your main app file is app.py, right? And then you're creating a web server, which is a Unicorn server, right? Pretty simple, straightforward. And log files is if you want to create a log file for your deployment, right? So right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you to create all these 4 files, and I'm going to paste the content for all these files. Let me see if I can copy paste the files itself. Yeah, I can do that.
Sumit, can you first
Yep.
check the app.py file? I think I saw that one of the JSON objects has a slightly different parameter comparing to the other 2 ones. It's called year published, and so one of the objects has year published, and the 2 other just have published. I assume that is supposed to be the same parameter, right?
Right. So we can change that.
Okay, thanks.
Good catch. So I have uploaded the 4 files. So you can directly download from here and paste it in your project.
Hey Sumit, is all these files are put in our GitHub?
I put it after the session. So the first session files are already there in the GitHub. Once the session ends, then I put it on the GitHub.
Okay, okay.
So it looks like, I mean, they're not getting the files. Is it uploaded in the chat or somewhere?
Yeah, it's uploaded on the chat.
I think it's not yet
Yeah.
Oh,
I
done.
don't see any files.
I think.
okay. Let me send it again. Can you guys see it now?
Yeah, now they are in the chat.
Is everyone able to copy paste these files in their project?
Sumit, it's not getting downloaded somehow, not sure why. It's showing not able to download. Sumit, are you able to hear me?
Is there any other way to for you to put it somewhere and then for us to download? Because this way it doesn't work for me.
Okay. So I'll put it on the GitHub repo.
Flask version in requirements is outdated. Should I update it?
What?
In the requirements file, Flask version is defined as 102.
Yep, that's
And
fine. You can change it to whatever
we can
the
change
latest version.
Okay.
Hey, I think Sumit, there are so many people who have not joined the Microsoft Teams, right? So they just click the link and they join.
Okay,
Yes.
okay.
But you know what? Those who do not have a Microsoft account, you should reach out to us, programs@testoper.com to get your Microsoft Teams account. Then you won't
So
have this problem.
will that be the same with the GitHub account as well then?
Yeah, so if they want to get access, they have to give their GitHub ID to us. So, you know, we can add them in both the accounts for free, right? So they can then utilize all the presentations, collaborations, chat, everything in the Teams. There are so many people I see who are not into the accounts. Like, for example, Lanny, Lewis, Emmanuel, and many, right? Just make sure that you let them know, okay?
So let me then create a Google Drive and put the files there and give the access to them for a while. So I've added this in my Google Drive, so you can download it from there.
You're able to share, Sumit, the files?
Yep, I did it in my personal Google Drive.
Yeah, maybe the next time, couple of things, right? One thing is you can put it in the GitHub before the session. And the second thing is make sure all the audience have an account of Microsoft Teams and GitHub to participate in a more active way.
Yep.
And I know that those who do not have today, please make sure that you request to the programs@testoper.com email ID.
Are you guys able to download now?
There is an issue with the file called Proc File. I guess, was that supposed to be proof file or Proc File?
No, that's supposed to be Proc File.
Mm-hmm.
What's the issue?
Is that something that we have to download?
No, so you have to.
Because
so
the
Proc File
Windows
has
is pointing to download it as an application. When I at least follow the Proc File, I just get like a prompt, like any Windows would prompt you to download.
So what you can do is, if you're having issues downloading Proc File, just create a file called Proc File, and I'll add the content of Proc File. I'll add it here, right?
Okay.
So you can do
Thank
this.
you.
So is everyone okay now? Can we move forward?
It's installing dependencies.
Sumit, just a question.
No, don't install the dependencies. You just have to copy paste the files. We're not running it in local, so you don't need to install dependencies.
Oops.
That's okay. That's okay. The whole point of this, as I said before, we are telling Heroku on what needs to be installed before they deploy it, right? We are not running this on our local. We are not deploying this on our local, so we don't need to actually install it. But if you install it, that's fine. There's no harm in it. Okay, so let's move on. Let's go to the next step, which is I'll do it along with you. What we need to do is Heroku login. Once you do it, it will ask you press any key to open up in the browser. Yes. So it will open a browser for me, and it will ask me to log in from there. And once you have entered your username, password, and entered on the UI, it will say close the browser. You close the browser and come back to this page, to your window, and it will say logged in as whatever the name is, right? Then what we need to do is we need to move to our project folder. So what I will do is CD. This is my project folder, which is I was already in the project folder. It was just to show you guys that you need to go inside your project folder.
Sumit, one question.
Yep.
You have pointed here to the Flask API folder, right?
Right.
And this folder is in the Git folder?
No. So this is my. So whatever my code repositories are, I created a folder called Git. So it has nothing to do with the real Git, right? It's just for my.
Okay, so I can just directly point to the Flask API folder and run that Heroku login command.
Heroku login, you can run it from anywhere.
From directly command prompt. Okay.
Yes, from anywhere. But after you logged in, then you need to come back to your project folder.
Okay.
Sumit, what type of the file, proc file, what type of the file it is?
So this is a Heroku deployment file. So right, it's telling Heroku. Once we move on to the Heroku, then I can explain it better. But this is a command given to Heroku deployment tool that what you're installing is a web application and your main file is app.py. This is an instruction given to Heroku deployment tool. It has nothing to do with your project, right? It's basically a deployment command.
So
the same way, all the three files that we have, right? The runtime file, the proc file, and your requirement.txt is these three files are commands to Heroku, basically telling that for my app, right, which is app.py, for my app, I need all these libraries, which is requirement.txt. And after that, I'm telling Heroku that I need to install my app on Python version 3.777, right, which is your runtime file. And then I'm telling the proc file through the proc file to Heroku that I need a web application where my main file is app.py. I can have multiple files, right? I need to tell which is my main file that I need to serve. Is that clear?
Yes, Sumit. Thank you.
Okay, once we are inside our folder, what we need to do is initialize the Git repository, right? So
Sumit, one question. It's still waiting and waiting for login. Do I have to manually go to the website and log in again, or?
It should open your browser automatically, or you can copy this, copy this link and paste it in a browser and do it from there.
Okay.
Let me know once that is done.
Yeah.
Hey, Sumit, even though I have Heroku installed in my machine, but somehow the command is not giving me a correct result.
Okay, so did you close your, was the command open when you installed Heroku? Can you close the command and open it one more time and do that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Is it working now?
Yes. Thank you so much. Yeah, it did work.
Okay. Do we have to execute this git init?
Yes. So the command is git init dot, which means the upper level folder, and then it should show you a message saying initialized empty Git repository.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Once that is done, run this command, which is basically git add the whole project, which is a dot, git add dot.
Okay. It's all showing warnings.
That's fine. Once that is done, you need to do a commit. So add git commit, any message that you want to give. So it should show me.
What's the argument? Hyphen AM or AN?
Yeah, AM.
Okay.
M for mango.
Okay.
And you can give any message.
Okay.
You can make a little bit font bigger, Sumit. Can you?
Better.
Yeah, better, yeah.
Oh yeah, thanks.
Okay. So the next step is to create an application on Heroku, right? You can either do it through UI or you can run this command. So I'm creating a project called Flash Training in Heroku. So the command is Heroku create whatever name you want to give, right? I'm giving Flash Training. So I'm going to run this command. So it created an application for me, and it created a repository for me as well.
The git commit command did not work for me.
What did it say?
The git commit command, it says that please tell me who you are and run git config global user.email, something like that. Unable to.
Did you install Git just now?
Yeah.
Okay. So are those the messages that you can ignore, or is it a hard stop there?
It doesn't proceed. It stopped. I think it's maybe it's looking for my email or my name, something like that. Git config
Okay.
global user email.
Yeah. So can you just enter your whatever email you have?
No, it's not. It didn't ask any question. I think it's expecting like that. Fatal unable to auto detect email address.
So you need to change that in Git config, right?
Okay. I actually installed Git, but I didn't configure anything as such here. So it just, when I opened it, it says create new repository, clone existing, open existing repositories.
Are you doing it from command or Git bash?
It's Git GUI.
Right. So don't do it from Git UI. Just do it from normal command.
From normal command prompt?
Yes.
Can I use the Git bash as well? Because for
You
me,
can. If it is configured, then you can use Git bash.
Yeah, I do have the Git bash also. Okay.
So you can give any name to your app, right? You don't have to give Flash Training. You can give Flash Training 1, Flash Training 2, whatever the name that you want.
Okay.
so when connecting through Git bash, again, do we have to go through all Heroku login and everything?
Yes.
Okay.
Or it should be logged in already. So what you can do is just run your Git command and then Heroku create whatever name you want to for your project. And if it is not executing, it will automatically ask you for login.
Okay, commit. So I can execute
But
this
you don't.
Commit command in the Git bash?
Yes.
You know, it says command not found.
What?
Commit command not found. It says.
Git commit -am any
Oh.
message after this.
Okay. Okay. No, it doesn't work. It says not a Git repository or any of the parent directories.
So, are you inside your project folder?
From the Git, no, I didn't point to the.
Yes, so that's why it won't accept as it as a Git folder, because the Git init you did it inside your project, right? So you have to move to your project. So you need to change the directory to your project directory. So in the interest of time, while you do that, I'll do the next commands.
Okay.
I'll circle back to you after doing a couple of commands. Right. All right. So the next step is to set the remote to your project. So this is the command. To do that, I will paste this in the Themes app. So this is basically what this command is doing is setting that Git to this remote branch, which we have already created in the Heroku. Right? And then what we're going to do is we're going to push our project to that repository. So we're going to push our current project into the master branch of Flask 20. So as soon as you try to push, right? So once you push it, it will automatically start building, right? So it's telling me Python app is detected. It is installing Python 3.7.7, which we mentioned in our runtime file. And now it's installing requirement.txt libraries. Once that is done, then it will run the proc file and will tell me that my deployment is complete. So I'll paste that command as well.
Once again, what does this command do?
So this command, which says git push Heroku master,
Yeah.
it basically pushes your current project to the master branch of the repository that you just created one level up, right? When you created the last command, you created a repository, and then you targeted your current repository towards that project repository, and then you pushed all your code to that master. As soon as you push the code, the Heroku tool, deployment tool, will automatically check if there is a proc file or not. If there is a proc file, it will go to requirement.txt. It will go to your runtime file and will fetch all the commands from there and starts the deployment. And this is the third level, which says proc file declares type web. So this is a web application. So after the deployment, it will give me a link to the app that I've created.
Okay, I changed dependencies and now this command is failing. So I guess I should not have changed them.
So keep the original dependencies for now. And then once they're deployed, then try changing. As soon as you change it, you can do another push and the build will be done. Right, so that's the whole idea. So you can change whatever you want, and then you just run the command from the commit level. So once you so let's say I change one of the things, right? And then let's say I change the requirement.txt. I don't want a Firebase. So I can remove that and then do another push to the repository. It will automatically build with the latest changes.
Well, when I try to push it second time, it says everything up to date.
And did you change anything?
I replaced
okay
file.
So are you doing you need to do a start from the add section itself. So you need to do git add again and do a commit again. and then do a git push.
Okay, understood.
Don't do a Heroku create or git remote again. Just do a git add, git commit, and git push.
Sumit, while I'm doing the Heroku Git remote -a flash training, I get the forbidden error.
That means you're not logged in to
I
Heroku.
have logged in. I again I first time I got it, then I thought it was not logged in. I logged in again to Heroku. It says logged in as my email ID. So then again I type the command, but still it says error. You do not have access to the app Flask training.
Oh, so don't. Your project name might be different. It's not Flask training.
Oh, okay. So it has to be project. Okay, fine.
So once this is done, now what we'll do is, is everyone able to get here to deploy their first APIs? Anyone got successful?
Yeah, I'm good now.
Nice. Okay, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna use this link. We're gonna
Sumit.
Yep.
Yeah, I got stuck at the git commit command. Now I'm able to run that. What can you just post in the chat what needs to be done next?
After git commit?
Yeah, after git commit.
So you need to run these 3 commands. Just change the project name. Right? Don't keep it as Flask training. Just change it to whatever name you like.
Okay, this needs to be done from command. Okay, yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So once that is done, you copy this. This is your API URL, which is Flask training. So once you go to your let me share. Yeah. So once I paste this link, I should get a message saying this, which says distant reading archive, a prototype API for distant reading of science fiction novels, which is our main URL, our root, which basically is what we were planning originally, right? So once that is done, let's look at our other roots, right? What are our roots? So we go to app.py and we look at the roots, and this is one of our roots, right? Copy from here and we try to put it here. Okay, so it's asking for the ID because we are going not on the ID. Let's go to the top one, which is all, right? So it should show me a list of all the books. So if I go here, I copy this, which is a JSON format. I go to JSON viewer. And I copy this here. It's returning me a JSON response with the 3 books that I mentioned, right? And with a structured way of an object, publish this, title this, first sentence, author, and similarly for all the 3 books. Now this is what basically we are hitting our own API and getting the data back from us. Now we can even use Postman or any other tool to run the same request and get the response from there. So basically it's a basic implementation of an API, right? Which basically tells you what data is getting returned. Now I will go to, oh, that's good. So now let's go to the ID section, right? So now we need to provide, now let's get the IDs for the books, right? So our route is this, right? API version 1 resource books, and I need an argument called ID. I need to provide that ID, right? That's my route. So if I go here, API version 1 resources books, this is my argument ID, and I'm providing the ID value of 0. So it should return me a book, which is the first book with the ID 0, which is this one, with the author, a title of Fire Upon the Deep, right? So I go here and I look here and copy paste in the JSON viewer. So it's returning me one book where the title is A Fire Upon the Deep, right? So if I give, let's try giving an ID 3, which doesn't exist. It will not return me anything. And if I don't give the ID at all, then I'm getting an internal server message. And if I giving the ID as none, again, the same message, right? So this is where you need to play around with the API, right? What kind of data is accepted? What kind of data is not implemented? So if I give the empty ID, it should not throw an internal server error. It should tell me that this ID does not exist, right? So these are the kind of things. So if I just do books and don't do anything, right? Now it's telling me error, no ID field provided, please specify an ID, right? But from the testing perspective, if I look, if I give ID is empty, it should show me the same message, but instead it's throwing an internal server error, right? Which means that this is an exception, which should not be there. If there is no ID that is there, then it should throw me a proper message, right? The UI, you will, once you hit this through the UI, you will get this error message on the UI, which you will not be able to understand because it's coming from the API, right? A UI message should be very clear to read for a user, right? Like when I'm not entering anything and just giving this path, I'm getting a good message saying error, no ID field provided, please specify an ID, which is very easy to read to the user. If I'm giving an empty internal server error message, my user doesn't know what wrong he's doing, right? Because he's not hitting the API directly, he's hitting it through the UI, right? So that's the whole concept. So that's how you need to get into the understanding of how API works and how to play around with the data of the API. Right? I think we're always over time.
Yeah. Sumit, maybe next time you can plan it better, but we are all learning together, right? So which is
right.
But today's session was an awesome session. So I really enjoyed it, because it kind of helps the people to understand how to create APIs, play with it, which will make them a better tester, right? So becoming a developer with a tester mindset will actually help them to become a better testers, and that's what we call ourselves. That's why we call ourselves Testoper, anyways. Hey, I think what I recommend is, I know that there are some of the questions that coming up and in the chat. let them continue discussing this offline, and in the Codeathon channel, you can ask more questions, and Sumit, you can respond there and things like that, right? And then we can close this call.
So please, we'll close this call now. So please shoot your questions on the team chat. I'll try to answer them today or tomorrow. But continuously keep posting questions as in when you get an error message or something that is not working for you.
Yeah, and the most important thing is I saw some of the people who joined today. You are not in WhatsApp channel, first of all, right? So you need to join into the WhatsApp channel in case if you wanted to kind of, communicate for urgent messages and so on. And I'm typing that WhatsApp channel in the chat. And the second thing is many of the people are not in the Microsoft Teams. Make sure that you also join the Microsoft Teams, and because we put a lot of data files and everything into that Microsoft Teams. That's the second key point. And then once you are in Microsoft Teams, there are so many things out there. I don't know whether you know that or not. There is a jobs channel where we post a lot of jobs, right? Today there was a DevOps jobs opening, right? You should look at the jobs channel and make use of that benefit for you guys. And there is a study group channel where you can come together and study together. There is a tech teaser where our experts put some teasing questions. You can respond to them, and you can make things better and you can learn things better, right? And then, like I was telling you earlier, we are going to kick off the hackathon discussion tomorrow at 7 p.m., right? So those who are interested to create, just not learn, but create and do something with it, innovation and stuff like that, you are welcome to join that hackathon kickoff session tomorrow at 7 p.m., right? The link is also available in the chat. So the WhatsApp link, Microsoft Teams, and also the hackathons, everything is available in that Microsoft Teams chat. Okay. With that, let's close the call, Sumit. I know back and forth, a lot of people are asking questions that can be taken offline.
Yeah. I'll do that.
Right.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Guys. Bye.
Bye.
See you guys next week, Wednesday, on time. Not 10 minutes late, right? Sumit, you have to start on time, and the same way. Let's use GitHub. Push the things in the GitHub before the session, so it becomes easy for access, right?
Yep.
These are the couple of improvements that we can do together to make this better.
Yep.
Right.
All right,
Bye, guys.
Thank you, everyone.
Take care. Bye.